Hi people. Okay, so in today's video I want to talk about the idea of creating and sending forth a fetch. Now a fetch is basically a spirit that the witch or the magician makes. Now there are two types, mainly there are two types of different fetch. And the first one is an astral fetch, and it's morely to do with shamanism, shapeshifting and a lot of that stuff. Now that tends to be a lot more complicated in ritual, and it involves basically it's an extension of yourself to create an extension of your spirit to go into the astral world, to shapeshift into the form of an animal. It's normally an animal, and to do your will. Now quite a lot they got confused with familiars as well. Now, there's, that involves hedge witchery. Normally, a lot of that is to do with hedge witchery. And the idea of creating a fetch in general is basically to create a specific purpose with that. Now, the second kind of fetch, which is what we're going to be speaking about today, is just a fetch that you create yourself. It's not really an extension of yourself. Like the astral fetch, it's not like that. It's an extension of your will. Of course it is, but it's not specifically yourself. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. It works morely on a mundane level, not sort of astral. It's mundane, and the idea of the fetch is to create a change within the mundane atmosphere. And rather than go into the astral to work to the mundane, it just works to the mundane. Now, these, fetches have been used a lot in history. Basically, what you do is you make a spirit, and it's been used it's been reported in so many different, witch trials as well. Like the Bell Witch, that was one of the only court cases that a spirit got blamed for death. That a spirit got blamed for all these things that happened within the house. There's a long story to it, but yeah, the Bell Witch trials, look it up. It's very, very interesting, really interesting. But this isn't a history lesson. I'm just giving an example. Now, the other thing, it morely does originate from traditional witchcraft. Don't count me on this. If somebody knows different, please tell me. I'd be interested. But I have an inkling that this is very, very traditional witchcraft, creating a spirit. A lot of people, when rooting through witches that have passed, when rooting through the houses, pardon me, that was gross. When rooting through the houses after a witch has died, tend to be very careful of bottles with corks in them, and tend to be very, very, very careful because they don't know what sort of spirit that's being unleashed. So yeah, that's basically another thing. Fetches are normally stored, not specifically. Well, yeah, they're stored. When I create a fetch, I always have an item to house it. So firstly and foremost, you need to think what you're doing it for. You need to think what is the specific reason you are creating that spirit for, and why. And you need to give it a stop date, a date when it stops and you destroy that spirit and it's released back into the ether, back into the universe. You have to stop it. You have to give it a stop date, and you have to destroy it, because if you don't, it tends to get nasty. Now, the idea is you can use pictures. I know people that use pictures. I myself, just as a example, I created a spirit to protect the house. So a good start off is clay. If you use clay or even wax, and mold is, mold what you want that spirit to look like. So if you want it to look like a wolf, make a wolf statue. If you want it to look like a cat, make a cat. An imp, make an imp. You know, it goes a demon, make a demon, a little fairy dude, make a fairy dude. You know, it goes on and on and on. Basically, you mold it, you shape it to how you want it to be. Another thing you can do is keep that in your mind's eye and have a pot. Now, this is a pot for my familiar, but you have a pot and you have some wool to house that spirit, with a lid as well. A lid's important, or you can use a box or a bottle. And again, with the bottle, make sure you have a seal, something like either a screw lid or a cork. Or and with the box, make sure it closes and you have a sort of latch on it to lock. You have to be very, very specific when making a spirit. I will give you this is what I do. This is how the ritual will go. In my mind's eye, I don't, like, sometimes I use clay, sometimes I don't. But 9 times out of 10, I use a pot, like a jar, honey jar with cotton wool in. And I have it by my side, and I have a candle, like just a white candle in front of me with my with my eyes closed, but knowing that that light's there. And it's a good sort of tool to use for representation on your visualization, because the majority of this is just visualization, and that is all it takes. So normally I have my hands like that cupped and projecting this energy there. I envision white light, or if it's for a specific purpose, say if it's for love, I will envision pink light, or sex, red light, or money, green, or it goes on. Whatever colours you associate with, use that. So yeah, I imagine all that energy, that specific energy that I want to attract, or that specific thing that I want to do. I imagine that being put into a ball of energy within my hands, within my grasp. And then what I tend to do is I shape the spirit to how I want the spirit to do. Now, first off, I select a name for this spirit. I did have... No, it's completely gone. I did, for you guys as well, I wrote down a couple of names of spirits that people have used through the ages. And it was from the Matthew Hopkins wood carving, and it's about familiar spirits, but it still goes, and it's very famous. You can look it up on Google Images, and it's basically loads of witches sat there saying my imp's names are, and it states all the names of the imps. I remember one was Vinegar Tom. So I will keep that spirit's name, and whilst directing that energy and shaping that spirit, I will chant their name. Do you want it male? Do you want it female? Do you want it to be an it? But only a very small thing about the name. Only you have that name, and that is nobody else's name to know. That spirit is your spirit. If you give somebody else the name of that spirit, you give that person power over your spirit, and then it can go tits up. Now, make sure you set a date when you create it. State what you want it to do. When you've created the spirit, say, I am creating you, Vinegar Tom, for the purpose of attracting £100 to me by the next full moon, or by the end of the week. And when that date passes, you are no longer needed, and you will go back into the ether. Everything will stop. You can bring in earth, water, fire, and air into it. You can say, I bless, I charge you, Vinegar Tom, with the power of fire. I'm using Vinegar Tom just as an example. It's a silly name, but whatever name you want to give it, you can give it Dolly, Balthazar, whatever, or you can just give it Bob or George or John, whatever. Up to you. It's your spirit. So anyway, you can, you can bring earth, water, fire, and air into it. And with fire, go, with this fire, I charge up your power, Vinegar Tongue. With this water, I give you psychic and magical energy, Vinegar Tongue. With this air, I give you the ability to fly through air to complete my will, Vinegar Tongue. With, with this earth, may you walk among the mundane and affect other people. So yeah, but you have to have a destroy date. You have to, and you can keep him in a box or a jar, whatever. But once that date is gone, you bring that spirit back. Once that past date is done, you have to do this ritual on the past date, and you call forth that spirit again. You say, I destroy you. Your date is gone. You are no longer in need. You are my fetch. You will do what I say. I destroy you and I release you back into the ether, and you will go back into the ether. And so, yeah, there you go. But you have to, you have to sort of make sure it's on a release date that you release them and that you destroy them. You have to make sure of that, because otherwise it can get messy. Because if you've got a spirit wandering about that's sort of like, well, I've done what I've needed to do. Pardon me. What do you want me to do now? Oh, look, I'm going to go and do that. And it can latch on to other people, and it can get fucking nasty. Spirits, created spirits, depending what reason they're for as well, it can get really, really frightening and really scary. So be careful to know when that destroy date is, and be specific. And remember with that name as well. This is the house on Haunted Hill, by the way. Remember with that name that you give them, that is their name, and that is it. Nobody else must know that name. It is only for you to know, and that fetch. So I hope that helps, and over and out.